Welcome back to online courses on entrepreneurship. Week 3, Entrepreneurial Context. This week we are going to look at a variety of forms and context of entrepreneurial activity. In this first short presentation, we are going to look at a variety of forms of entrepreneurship. First, we are going to look at corporate entrepreneurship set in a large organizational context. Secondly, we're going to look at social entrepreneurship, where you may find different motivations and different processes of entrepreneurship activity. Thirdly, we're going to look at international entrepreneurship, where the startup company are embedded in the global networks in different countries. Finally, we're going to look at entrepreneurial activities specifically set in family business context.
Very often, we associate entrepreneurship with a very limited number of contexts. This is primarily focused on new ventures and small and medium-sized businesses, primarily in the private sector and very often in the mature Western economies. The reality is that entrepreneurial activity takes place in a much larger scope. It takes place in large corporations. It takes place in social enterprise. It happens in the public sector. It takes place in diverse international communities of organizations, and it happens through a variety of mechanisms, such as bottom-of-the-pyramid entrepreneurship and things like subsistence entrepreneurship. We're going to take a very brief look at some of these contexts. Your readings and other available information provide you with additional background. For the most part, I expect you to simply be aware of the different kinds of contexts to understand this true scope of entrepreneurial activity. In large corporations, entrepreneurship may seem like an oxymoron. How can you start new ventures? How can you be entrepreneurial in the context of a large corporation? Well, in fact, entrepreneurs are needed in large organizations. They can improve the core business through innovation, and they can help the organization create and exploit opportunities to keep ahead of competition. One of the most famous examples of entrepreneurial activity is in 3M, which is an active supporter of innovative thinking throughout the organization. 3M was one of the first organizations that required many of its employees to take time each week to work on activities outside of their normal job description. You may be more familiar with Google's policy that its employees are supposed to spend somewhere between 10 and 20% of their time doing something other than what their job is. You can learn much more about the case of 3M's Post-it notes from the link provided on this particular slide. You may, if you're not familiar with the story, what supposedly happened was that one of the scientists at 3M was working on a glue for tape, and the glue was not particularly sticky enough, and so the innovation was discarded temporarily until someone appreciated that it could be used to create notes that could be stuck in one place, removed, and then stuck in another place. Corporate entrepreneurship can be a very difficult process, however, in part because the incentives inside the organization may be disruptive for entrepreneurial activity. It can work when experimentation is rewarded, when there's a willingness to allow both individuals and specific projects to fail, when there's a process of ongoing and rapid testing, when there's a process for investing resources into innovative and risky ideas, and when there's an understanding that dead projects will be killed quickly, regardless of who started them or who's been supporting them. Corporate entrepreneurship will tend to fail when the old business dominates whatever new ideas are being developed. When entrepreneurs aren't rewarded, and this includes being rewarded for coming up with failed ideas. This is one of the reasons that this is very difficult to do in corporate contexts. It's likely to fail when the new business is too different or isn't spun off quickly enough, when there's too much centralized control, and when everything is measured by profits. There are, however, many cases of entrepreneurial activity being very successful at companies like Google and companies like 3M, and even larger, more monolithic companies like IBM. I encourage you to take a look at both of the links that are provided here. The article in Entrepreneur Magazine talking about situations in which entrepreneurship was successful, and the link to this report from Ernst & Young talking about creating formal structures for intrapreneurship in large organizations. One of the reasons that intrapreneurship in large organizations may fail is because it's done on a very ad hoc basis. And while that is generally how small startup ventures work, it's not very effective in a large organization because it tends to be overwhelmed by the existing formal structure. Let's talk about another context for entrepreneurial activity, social entrepreneurship. This is where the entrepreneurial activity is intended to create direct value for the society. In some cases, it's associated with individuals focused on self-improvement and increased self-efficacy. It may be cases in which they're trying to accomplish something that they believe is good for themselves and would be good for other people. In some cases, social entrepreneurship is primarily driven by the use of time and money. In the case of someone like Bill Gates, setting up the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, in which high net worth individuals provide funds towards other entrepreneurs and socially beneficial activities, or it's some individuals, people like Muhammad Yunus, who devote their work life towards making a difference in society. Regardless, the focus of social entrepreneurship is the development and growth of ventures that have social objectives that are either equally important or more important than the financial objectives of the. I'd like you to watch a short video about Grameen Bank, which is the organization created by Muhammad Yunus to provide microfinance loans to people all over the world with limited access to credit. I appreciate the fact that Grameen Bank has come under additional scrutiny and there have been some questions about its operations. But I think it's still a useful example to look at, both in terms of understanding the characteristics, traits, and mission of the individual founder, as well as looking at how it operationalized its mission in order to make its social entrepreneurship impact.